let's make sure we're all caught up to speed on everything we know about Venin. Keyword being, this is all we know, meaning facts about Venin. We're not going to do a lot of speculating and theories in here because then we would just be talking forever and ever and ever. So Venin, also known as Dark Wielders, are magically corrupted people. They draw power from the ground, aka channel from the source. This ability to wield magic is in stark contrast to the typical way that one channels power from bonding with a dragon or griffin. This unnatural tap into power has a terrible cost though. You become corrupted and you lose your soul. Nature likes all things in balance, and Venin take power that they're not supposed to, so in turn they lose their humanity. Let's talk about the Venin hierarchy. A key piece of information we get in Iron Flame about Venin are the Venin ranks and their hierarchy based on their age, experience, and amount of power that they've channeled. So first we have initiates, who are the lowest level of Venin. Their eyes may have reddish rings depending on how often or how recently they channeled power. This is Jack's Venin rank as well as Xaden's by the end of the book, and I'm going to guess it is the primary rank for Venin that are hiding in plain sight within Navarre's wards. Next we have Asems, whose eyes fluctuate in varying degrees of red and the veins distend when riled. This is like the Venin student Violet fought on the back of Tarn in 4th Wing. Then of course we have Sages. We've talked a lot about Sages throughout our books here. Sages are responsible for initiates, and while the book doesn't say, I'm going to assume Asems as well because these lower level Venin are students and Sages are their teachers. Sages' eyes are permanently red and their veins perpetually distend toward their temples and expand with age. We also know that there are multiple sages. Think of them as the main Venin who are in leadership, but they're not like the head honcho. Which brings us to the 4th and final Venin ranking, the Maven, aka the General, aka the Big Cheese. Not much is known about Maven because one has never been captured. We just know that they're in charge. I'm assuming that there are several Maven and not just one, because in Xaden's POV chapter 66, when he faces off with one, the Maven says, I am a general. Not the general, but a general. While we don't know exactly how Venin age, we do get hints from the higher ranked ones that they can be centuries old. So the laws of aging, they don't work the same way once when you turn Venin. What are Venin capable of? A whole lot of scary shit, that's what. They gather more power by channeling from the source, but what does that mean? They literally pull power from the earth and they suck the life out of the ground. The grass turns brown, flowers lose their color, stone color even loses it, becomes a beige instead. The energy from life itself is drawn into the Venin for them to then powerfully channel back out. Magic that Venin wield includes, but is certainly not limited to, balls of blue flame that they can throw like daggers. They can also teleport. They can create a wave of death from where they stand. That's one of the scariest things here. It's a dead zone where anyone who is within that zone there shrivels up, dies, and then their power is now the Venin's. If they grab hold of you, like the Venin does to the poor guard in Corden, they can essentially suck the life out of you. Some Venin, specifically Sages and Maven, they use staffs to wield magic, and that magic includes defying gravity by lifting people into the air. We learn from Xaden's POV chapter that after he turns Venin, his signet power is heightened. Now he's referring specifically that his shadow wielding is even stronger. It's unknown to be determined about his intrinsic ability, but this is definitely something to keep an eye out for as we head into book 3. One of the epigraphs state that Venin are believed to have a stronger sense, like farsight. However, I don't know if that means a heightened senses in general or like a singular sense is stronger, or if this is referring to senses as in powers. So that was a little bit confusing, but the bottom line is Venin get heightened senses, heightened sense of power with their signets, and they're really scary. Think of power as an addiction for Venin. Once they channel from the source, there's no turning back, and they begin to crave more power. The signet blocking serum seems to keep the Venin under control though, based off of what we know with Jack Barlow. But on that note, there is no cure after you turn Venin. That we know of. Come on, we need to cure you, Xaden! In addition to wielding dark magic, Venin are insanely good at hand-to-hand combat, as Nicole was saying earlier on. They can quickly adapt to an opponent's fighting style, and Venin move fast. They use swords and then poisoned green-tipped serrated daggers that we learn are deadly. Ha! Go figure, another deadly weapon. But wounds from these daggers and poison can be mended, as we see what Brennan does with Violet at the end of Fourth Wing. Dark Wielders also create wyvern, which are controlled and tethered to life by these Venin who create it. They share a collective conscience, so anything the wyvern sees, the Venin does as well. Interestingly, wyvern have extremely complex runes inside of them, so we can assume Venin create the wyvern using this rune magic. And Darna also notes that wyverns smell like stolen magic. Very interesting note there. There are several types of wyvern, including one that produces blue fire, a faster one that breathes green fire, and then another one that breathes cherry red fire. And so I'm assuming that all of these, I'll say colors, are based off of just the fire that they breathe, and that all of the wyvern are still gray. Venin who are bonded with dragons can also control them, like what we see that Jack does with Bade, and they do not die if their bonded dragon dies, because remember, they are tethered to life no longer by their dragon, but by the power that they channel from the earth. Last thing in this little section here is that Venin can be lured with runes, as we talked a lot about here. They feel this pull, and the rune is like a tracker for them. This was present at Resin, and it is of course what Jack uses here to bring them directly to Biscayeth after he deactivates the Wardstone. So what about some of the Venin weaknesses? They've got to have some weaknesses, right? Venin are extremely hard to kill. They are immune to dragonfire, except apparently in Darna's. We're going to talk about that in the next few episodes. And the only weapon that can kill them is alloy. That's why making alloy-infused weapons are absolutely essential to the continent's fight. Violet's lightning wielding can also kill Venin, and when a Venin dies, all the wyvern it creates also dies. We also know that a weapon killed off the Venin 600 years ago during the Great War. But that's all we know. Don't get me started on that whole thing again. Venin can also be inhibited when they are forced to stay airborne, which restricts them from being able to channel to the source. Air wielders are key here, or runes like what we see in the chest in Corden. If they've already drained something, they cannot drain that same thing again. For example, Takaris' stones that were mined from Venin-drained land couldn't be used as a power source again. I love how Violet noted that. Navarre's wards certainly limit Venin's power, but they can still function and even turn within the wards. Again, everything we thought we knew is not true anymore with that. And Rebecca Yarros has confirmed we'll learn more about the ins and outs of how Venin work within the wards in the next book. But for now, we know that you can turn Venin within the wards, and you can still channel from the source, which is how you turn, of course, in the first place. But yes, the wards do largely weaken Venin and dark wielding abilities. Last thing here to note about Venin weaknesses, like I mentioned a little while ago, Biscayeth has developed a serum that they use on Venin like Jack to block them from channeling power to the source. Let's discuss the history of Venin and the lead up to their position of strength in Iron Flame. Until now, Navarre believed that Venin were mythological creatures found only in fables, but obviously that is not the case at all, and Poromiel has been fighting them for the better part of 50 years, and their power and strength and numbers have been growing over these past few years in particular. Folklore tells the origin story of three brothers, one who bonded with a dragon, one who bonded with a griffin, and the third brother who became so jealous that he drew directly from the source, losing his soul and waging war on the other two. But let's take it back 650 years ago to the Great War. General Daramore and his forces fought against the First Six and their allies when the general left the Barrens and invaded the rest of the continent. General Daramore left the Barrens in ruin, so we are going to make an assumption that he led an army of Venin and is central to their origin story. Again, that is an assumption there. He and the Venin caused the Barrens to turn into a lifeless region on the continent, since the Venin sucked all the magic out of the lands. Yes, Nicole, and I also do speculate that General Daramore is a maven, or I'll say is the top maven. However, the general and his armies were indeed defeated. And once again, all we know is that the Venin were killed off by a secret weapon that we know nothing about. Moving on. The end of the Great War led to the unification of Navarre. Remember that Navarre gave Poromiel 1 year to migrate across its borders before they put the wards up to keep the Venin and everyone else out. 200 years later, Navarre history erased Venin, so its citizens truly do not believe that they are real, or that they ever existed, or that they are anything more than in fables, if they've even heard the fables at all. But Poromiel sure knows that they're real. God, do they know that they're real. They've been fighting the Dark Wielders for years. The Venin have been increasing in power and numbers, attacking Poromil villages and cities. It was only within the last 50 years that Poromil realized that they were not only coming from the Barrens anymore. Venin recruit wannabe flyers who failed at bonding with a griffin. Again, I think that Jack is another great example here about possibly being recruited because he wanted more power, and he was so angry that he didn't get all of the power that he wanted from bonding with a dragon like Terran. The Venin overtake Zolia in early fall, which is the third largest city and the second most populous in Braverick, Poromil. The Battle of Zolia lasted 2 whole days and 10,000 Poromilians lost their lives. That is so sad. The fall of Zolia was a huge loss for Poromil and a tremendous gain for Venin. Zolia was home to Cliffsbane Academy, where the Griffin Flyers trained and where most of the literature on Venin was kept. Luckily, Poromil was able to smuggle some of that literature out, but gosh, I can only imagine all that they lost there when the Venin took over. Along with Zolia, the Venin are strategically invading Poromil and heading toward Navarre's borders. Venin have been most active in invading Braverick, which makes sense because that's right up against the Barrens' border the most. But the Venin have even started going as far north as Signisen, and they are also present at the coast along the southern province, Krovla. More recently, the Venin are heading up the Stonewater River, which intersects with Samara at Navarre's border. Again, I'm really asking anybody out there to give me a map like what we have in Battle Brief, the most updated one with all the red dots and everything. So the Venin have concentrating numbers here by the Navarrian border that intersects with the Stonewater River, branching out and poised for that targeted attack as soon as the wards fall. Whew! I'm sure I didn't even get everything about the Venin, but that's at least a good Spark Notes version for you all.